Captain Jake Morrison walked through the massive doors of the Galactic Council building on Centauri Prime and felt very small. The building reached high into the purple sky and was made of some kind of crystal that seemed to glow from inside. He had been preparing for this day for 3 years, but nothing could have prepared him for how big everything was here. Lieutenant Amy Roberts walked beside him carrying the datapad that held Earth's application to join the council. She looked nervous and kept checking the translation device on her wrist. Behind them walked Ambassador Lisa Grant, who had spent most of her life studying alien cultures and languages. All 3 humans wore their best-dressed uniforms, but they still felt out of place among the strange aliens who moved through the halls. The council chamber was enormous with seats, arranged in circles that went up and up until they disappeared in shadows. Each seat was built for a different type of alien, and some of them were so strange that Jake could not even tell which end was the head. In the center of it all was a platform where speakers could stand and address the council. At the very top of the chamber sat Vorlok the Ancient, who was older than any human civilization. His species looked like tall, thin trees with faces, and his voice could be heard clearly, even though he was very far away. Around him sat representatives from 47 different worlds, and each one looked at the humans with curiosity or amusement. Jake stepped onto the speaking platform and cleared his throat. The universal translator would change his words into languages that the aliens could understand, but he still felt strange, knowing that beings from across the galaxy were listening to him. Amy stood to his right, and Lisa to his left, and together they represented all of humanity. Honored members of the Galactic Council, Jake began, and his voice echoed through the huge chamber. We come from Earth to request membership in your great organization. Humanity has achieved faster than light travel, and we have colonies on 6 different worlds. We believe we can contribute to the peace and prosperity of the galaxy. A sound like laughter came from many of the alien representatives. Some clicked their claws together while others made buzzing noises, and a few just stared with what might have been amusement. Jake felt his face get hot, but he continued speaking. We have brought examples of our technology and records of our achievements, he said as Lisa activated a holographic display. Images of human cities appeared in the air, showing gleaming towers and flying cars. Ships launching from Earth appeared next, followed by pictures of the colonies on Mars and the other worlds. Vorlok leaned forward, and his ancient voice filled the chamber. Humans of Earth, we have reviewed your application. Your species has indeed learned to travel between stars, and you have built settlements on other worlds. This is impressive for such a young race. Jake felt hope rise in his chest, but then Vorlok continued speaking. However, your ships are crude things made of metal and fire. Your weapons are simple devices that throw pieces of metal. Your cities are primitive structures that cannot even protect themselves from weather. What could such a backward people offer to races that have mastered the secrets of the universe? Counselor Vex, who represented the warrior races, stood up. His forearms gestured at the human displays, and his voice was full of scorn. Look at these pathetic attempts at technology. Our children build better toys than these ships you are so proud of. Our simplest weapons could destroy your entire fleet without effort. More laughter came from the assembled aliens. Some of them began showing their own displays, which made human technology look like stone tools by comparison. Ships the size of cities moved through space without any visible means of propulsion. Weapons that could crack planets appeared in the holograms, along with cities that floated in the clouds of gas giants. Counselor Zanara rose from her coil-shaped seat, and her snake-like body swayed as she spoke. Perhaps you have other qualities that could be useful. Do any of your people possess psychic abilities like the Etherians? Can you manipulate energy like the Centauri? Are you mighty warriors like the Krillians? Lisa stepped forward to answer. Our people excel at solving problems and adapting to new situations. We have overcome many challenges, including wars, diseases, and natural disasters. We learn quickly, and we never give up. This caused even more laughter from the council. Several aliens began talking at once, and their words were translated as mockery and disbelief. One alien that looked like a floating brain said that every species thought they were special. Another that resembled a giant insect clicked out words about primitive self-importance. Warlock raised one of his branch-like arms for silence. Humans of Earth, your confidence is amusing but misplaced. You speak of overcoming challenges on a single world as if this makes you remarkable. The Council has witnessed the rise and fall of entire star systems. We have seen species far more advanced than yours beg for our protection. Your trials are nothing compared to the forces that move through the galaxy. Jake felt anger building in his chest as he looked up at the ancient being. With respect, Counselor, perhaps you underestimate what humans can accomplish when we set our minds to it. Underestimate? Vorlak's voice carried amusement. Child, we have data on every aspect of your civilization. Your largest fleet contains 300 ships that would be destroyed by a single Council patrol vessel. Your most powerful weapons could not scratch the paint on our weakest defensive platforms. Your entire industrial output could not supply one of our minor colonies for a single day. The chamber erupted in sounds that the translators indicated were various forms of alien laughter. Jake looked around at the faces staring down at him and saw nothing but contempt and amusement. These beings saw humans as nothing more than primitive children playing with dangerous toys. Your application is denied, Vorlak announced with finality. Return to your small blue world, humans. Perhaps in 1,000 years, when you have achieved true civilization, we might consider your request again. Until then, you are forbidden from entering Council space or interfering in galactic affairs. The great crystal doors opened behind them, with a sound like thunder. Jake knew they were being dismissed like children sent away from an adult conversation. He wanted to argue, to demand that they reconsider, but Amy touched his arm and shook her head slightly as the three humans walked back through the massive halls. Jake noticed something strange. While the Council members had laughed at their displays of human technology, several of the younger aliens had been taking very careful notes. Their scanning devices had been recording everything, and Jake wondered what they had seen that their elders had missed. Outside the building, Lisa finally spoke. That went about as well as we expected, she said with a slight smile that surprised Jake. How can you smile after that humiliation? Amy asked. Lisa looked back at the crystal building that housed the most powerful government in the galaxy. Because they saw exactly what we wanted them to see, she said quietly. And now we know exactly what they think of us. Dr. Richard Coleman sat in his laboratory, 5 miles beneath the Rocky Mountains, and smiled as he watched the Council's broadcast about primitive humans. The irony was not lost on him that while aliens across the galaxy laughed at human technology, he was surrounded by machines that would make their most advanced computers look like children's calculators. The lab stretched for hundreds of yards in every direction and was filled with equipment that officially did not exist. Quantum processors hummed quietly as they solved problems that should have taken centuries to calculate. Energy weapons that could punch holes through planets hung on the walls like artwork. In the center of it all sat a holographic display showing real-time intelligence from across the galaxy. General Patricia Stone walked into the lab, carrying a cup of coffee and looking tired. She had been up for 3 days straight, coordinating humanity's real response to the Council's rejection. The rejection had been expected and planned for, but it still stung to watch their diplomats being laughed at by creatures who had no idea what humans were really capable of. Doctor, please tell me again why we let them humiliate our people like that, she said as she sat down in one of the lab chairs. Coleman turned away from his computers and adjusted his glasses. General, everything we showed the Council was real. Human technology. Those ships, those weapons, those cities, all exist and function exactly as we demonstrated. What we didn't show them was the technology we developed from studying their own artifacts. He activated a wall display that showed two very different human fleets. On the left were the ships that had visited Council Worlds, crude metal constructions with nuclear engines and projectile weapons. On the right were sleek vessels that seemed to bend light around themselves as they moved. For the past 50 years, we've been finding crashed alien ships and abandoned technology throughout human space. Some of it was thousands of years old, but even the oldest pieces were more advanced than anything we had. Instead of trying to copy it, we studied the principles behind it and improved on them. Stone looked at the display with admiration and worry. These stealth ships, how many do we have? The first production run gave us 200 vessels of various sizes. Each one is equipped with weapons and defenses that exceed anything in the Council's active fleets. More importantly, they're completely invisible to Council sensors. Coleman brought up another display, showing a cutaway view of one of the stealth ships. Instead of metal hulls and bulkheads, the interior looked more like a living organism, with corridors that pulsed with energy and walls that seemed to repair themselves. We call them ghost ships because they can pass right through Council space without being detected. The hulls are made from programmable matter that can change shape and density on command. The weapons use principles that the Council races abandoned centuries ago because they thought them too dangerous. A new voice came from the lab entrance as Captain Helen Foster walked in. She had just returned from a 6-month mission in the furthest reaches of Council space, and her report would change everything humanity thought about their alien neighbors. General, Doctor, I've completed the reconnaissance of all major Council territories. What I found was both encouraging and terrifying. Foster activated her own holographic display, showing detailed scans of Council military bases, shipyards, and defensive installations. The images were incredibly detailed, far more than should have been possible from ships that were supposedly too primitive to pose a threat. The good news is that Council technology has barely advanced in the past 1,000 years. They've become so comfortable with their superiority that they've stopped innovating. Their newest battleships are just larger versions of designs they were using when humans were still learning to make fire. Coleman nodded as he studied the images. That matches our analysis of their technology samples. They've reached a plateau and stayed there. The bad news, Foster continued, is that they have a lot of these old ships. The Krillian Empire alone has over 50,000 heavy cruisers, and the other races have similar numbers. If it came to a straight fight, they could overwhelm us through sheer numbers. Stone leaned back in her chair and considered this information. But it won't be a straight fight, will it, Doctor? No, General, it won't. While the Council has been building more of the same ships for centuries, we've been developing weapons and tactics specifically designed to counter their advantages. Coleman activated another display, showing human weapon systems that looked more like works of art than instruments of war. Energy beams that could pass through shields, missiles that could phase in and out of reality, and something called a quantum disruptor that could make enemy ships simply stop existing. The Council's shields are designed to stop energy weapons and deflect physical projectiles. They've never encountered weapons that can ignore the laws of physics as they understand them. Foster pulled up tactical analysis of Council fleet formations. Their battle tactics haven't changed either. They still fight in large formations with heavy ships in the center and lighter vessels providing support. It's all very predictable. Predictable is good, Stone said as she studied the alien battle plans. It means we can plan counters for every move they might make. Dr. Coleman brought up one final display that showed the true scope of humanity's hidden capabilities. Secret shipyards in the asteroid belt were producing vessels at a rate that would have shocked the Council. Manufacturing plants on the dark side of the moon were turning out weapons and equipment using techniques that bent reality itself. General, we currently have enough firepower to cripple the Council's infrastructure without engaging their military directly. Our analysis shows that removing key supply depots, communication hubs, and manufacturing centers would effectively end their ability to maintain their empire. Foster smiled as she added her own intelligence to the mix. And I know exactly where all their critical facilities are located. Most of them are protected by defenses that assume attackers will come from normal space, using conventional weapons. Stone stood up and walked to the center of the lab where all the displays came together to show humanity's true position in the galaxy. What the Council saw as a primitive backwater was actually a technological powerhouse that had been hiding in plain sight. How long before we're ready to show the Council what humans are really capable of? She asked. Coleman checked his computer displays and ran quick calculations in his head. The stealth fleet is fully operational now. Our intelligence networks are in place throughout Council space. The quantum weapons platforms are charged and ready. We could begin operations immediately if you give the order. What about our people? How will they react when they learn that everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the galaxy was wrong? Foster considered this question carefully. The diplomatic humiliation will actually help us there, General. People are angry about being treated like primitives. When they learn that we have the power to respond, they'll support whatever action we take. Stone made her decision with the certainty that had made her one of humanity's most respected military leaders. Doctor, begin Phase 1 of the operation. Captain Foster, I want detailed targeting information on Council infrastructure in all major systems. It's time to show the galaxy that humans are not as primitive as we appear. As the general left the lab, Coleman and Foster began the process that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The Council had mocked Earth, thinking themselves safe in their superiority. They were about to learn that appearances could be very deceiving, and that humanity's greatest weapon had always been the ability to surprise their enemies. Admiral Kyle Barnes watched through the quantum sensors of his stealth cruiser as the Krillian monitoring station at Helix Nebula simply vanished from existence. One moment the massive station was there with its thousands of alien workers and powerful sensor arrays. The next moment there was nothing but empty space and a small cloud of particles that had once been metal and flesh. Clean hit, reported Commander Nancy Price from her weapons station. The quantum disruptor worked exactly as designed. No survivors, minimal debris, and no way for anyone to tell what happened. Barnes nodded as he studied the sensor readings. The station had been destroyed so completely that it would look like some kind of accident or natural phenomenon. But Krillians would find no evidence of human involvement, and no clues about what kind of weapon could cause such total destruction. Time to next target, he asked his navigation officer. 18 hours to the supply depot at Rigel 7, sir. 3 star systems away. Captain Dan Murphy was leading his team through the corridors of a Zentari research facility on Kelmos Prime. The aliens' energy-based security systems had proven completely useless against human electromagnetic pulse grenades, and their force fields couldn't stop soldiers. Wearing quantum phase suits that let them walk through solid matter, Murphy's team moved like ghosts through the facility, copying data from computers and taking samples of experimental technology. The Zentari researchers never knew they had visitors, and the security systems registered nothing unusual. In 30 minutes, humanity had acquired 30 years' worth of advanced research data. Package secured, Murphy whispered into his communication device as his team prepared to leave. Beginning extraction sequence. His soldiers activated their phase suits again and walked through the outer walls of the facility before disappearing into the night. By morning, the Zentari would discover that their most secret projects had been compromised, but they would have no idea how or by whom. On Earth, Admiral Grace Kelly sat in the command center deep beneath NORAD and watched as reports came in from across the galaxy. Her staff had spent months planning this operation, and now they were seeing their careful preparation pay off. The Council's infrastructure was being systematically dismantled by forces they couldn't detect or understand. Status report, she requested as Colonel Steve Rogers approached her command station. Phase 1 is proceeding ahead of schedule. Admiral, we've eliminated 17 monitoring stations, 12 research facilities, and 8 supply depots. The enemy still has no idea what's attacking them. Kelly studied the tactical displays that showed the expanding pattern of destruction across Council space. Each target had been carefully chosen to maximize disruption, while minimizing the risk of detection. The attacks looked random to outside observers, but they were actually part of a precise plan to cripple the Council's ability to maintain their empire. Any sign that they're figuring out what's happening? Negative, Admiral. Their investigation teams are finding nothing useful at the attack sites. Some are blaming equipment failures, others suspect unknown space phenomena, and a few are starting to panic about invisible enemies. Meanwhile, panic was indeed beginning to spread through the Council territories as word of the mysterious attacks reached the highest levels of government. Emergency sessions were being called on every major world as military leaders tried to explain how their most secure facilities were being destroyed by an enemy no one could identify. Counselor Vex stood before the Krillian High Command and tried to maintain his composure as he delivered the latest casualty reports. 17 of our border monitoring stations have been destroyed in the past week. Each one was eliminated so completely that we cannot determine what weapon was used. Could this be the work of the Etherian separatists? Asked General Vortok, commander of the Krillian Home Fleet. The Etherians use energy weapons that leave distinctive signatures. These attacks show no energy discharge, no projectile impact, and no explosive residue. Whatever destroyed our stations simply made them cease to exist. Similar conversations were taking place on Centauri Prime, where the loss of 3 research facilities had sent shockwaves through their scientific community. The stolen data included projects that could have advanced their technology by decades, and the manner of the theft suggested capabilities that shouldn't have existed. Our security systems recorded nothing unusual, reported Chief Scientist Celera to the Centauri Council. The force fields never flickered, the sensors detected no intrusion, and the guard patrols saw nothing. Yet somehow, our most sensitive data was copied and removed. Counselor Zenara coiled her serpentine body tighter as she considered the implications. If an unknown species has developed stealth technology this advanced, we may be facing a threat unlike anything in recorded history. On Etherian Prime, the psychic collective that governed their species was experiencing something they had never felt before: fear of the unknown. Their mental abilities allowed them to sense the thoughts and emotions of most other species. But the attackers remained invisible to their psychic senses as well as their technology. The minds behind these attacks are shielded from our perception, reported Mindspeaker Corveth to the Etherian Assembly. We sense only emptiness where the attackers should be, as if they exist in a space beyond our ability to touch. Back on Earth, Dr. Coleman was monitoring the enemy response from his underground laboratory. The quantum communication networks that humanity had secretly placed throughout Council space were providing real-time intelligence about how the aliens were reacting to the attacks. They're starting to panic, he reported to General Stone during their daily briefing. The Krillians are moving their fleets to defensive positions around their core worlds. The Centauri have activated their emergency protocols and are shutting down non-essential facilities. The Etherians are trying to probe for the attackers using mass psychic scans. Stone smiled grimly as she reviewed the intelligence reports. Perfect. Fear makes people make mistakes, and we need them to be as confused and frightened as possible for Phase 2. What about the other Council races? Most of them are following the lead of the major powers. They're pulling back their forces, fortifying their key installations, and demanding explanations from the Council leadership. The unity that has held their empire together for thousands of years is starting to crack. Captain Helen Foster entered the briefing room with updated targeting information for the next wave of attacks. Admiral Kelly wants to move to Phase 2 ahead of schedule. The enemy's defensive adjustments are creating new opportunities we should exploit. Stone considered this recommendation. The original plan had called for 2 more weeks of infrastructure attacks before revealing humanity's true capabilities. But Foster was right about the opportunities. Fear was making the Council races predictable, and predictable enemies were easy to defeat. Very well. Signal Admiral Kelly that she has authorization to begin Phase 2. It's time to show the Council that their empire is not as strong as they believed. As the order went out to human forces across the galaxy, the hidden war entered its next phase. The Council had mocked Earth as primitive and backward, never imagining that humans possessed the technology and skill to strike at the heart of their civilization. Now they would learn that underestimating humanity was the last mistake their empire would ever make. The burning had begun, and soon the entire galaxy would see the flames. The message appeared on every screen across Council space at exactly the same moment, cutting through their most secure networks, as if their encryption was nothing more than a child's code. On Centauri Prime, Vorlok the Ancient was meeting with his advisors when the crystal walls of his chamber suddenly displayed an image that made his ancient heart skip a beat. Captain Jake Morrison stood in what appeared to be the command center of a vessel that defied everything the Council thought they knew about human technology. Behind him, holographic displays showed information that would have taken their best computers years to process, while the walls themselves seemed to pulse with energy that made their most advanced power sources look primitive. "Greetings, members of the Galactic Council," Morrison began, his voice carrying clearly across 47 worlds simultaneously. "I believe you remember me from our meeting 6 months ago when you found our request for membership amusing. In the Council chambers, emergency sessions had been called as the full scope of the attacks became clear. Entire sectors of their space were now dark zones where nothing functioned properly, and their military forces were reporting equipment failures on a scale that suggested coordinated sabotage. You laughed at our ships," Morrison continued, as the display behind him showed vessels that bore no resemblance to the crude metal constructions the Council had mocked. These new ships moved through space like living things, their hulls shifting and changing as they adapted to different situations. Energy readings from the vessels showed power outputs that exceeded anything in the Council's combined fleets. Councilor Dex felt his 4 hearts racing as he watched the human captain speak. The weapons displayed on the human ships were beyond his understanding, and the tactical formations they showed suggested a level of strategic thinking that his warrior culture had never encountered. "You dismissed our weapons as primitive projectile throwers," Morrison said as holographic displays demonstrated human armaments that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Beams that could pass through any shield, missiles that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and something that made enemy vessels simply fade from existence. On Centauri Prime, the scientific community was in chaos as they analyzed the technology being displayed. Chief Scientist Cellarat spent her entire career studying advanced physics, but the principles behind human technology made no sense according to everything she thought she knew about the universe. "You mocked our industrial capacity," Morrison noted, while showing manufacturing complexes hidden within asteroid fields and on the dark sides of planets. The output figures being displayed showed production rates that exceeded the combined capacity of all Council races, using methods that seemed to create matter from pure energy. Admiral Grace Kelly's face appeared beside Morrison's, and her presence commanded immediate attention from military commanders across the galaxy. "What you witnessed 6 months ago was our public face, the image we present to unknown civilizations while we determine their true intentions. What you are experiencing now is a small demonstration of our actual capabilities." The Council chamber erupted in panic as representatives from dozens of species demanded explanations, accused each other of hiding crucial information, and frantically tried to understand how they had so completely misjudged the humans. Vorlok raised his branch-like arms for silence. But for the first time in thousands of years, the assembled aliens ignored his authority. The question now, Morrison continued, his expression becoming serious, is whether this ends here, with a demonstration of our capabilities, or whether we show you just how completely we can dismantle everything you have built over the past 10,000 years. Dr. Coleman appeared on the transmission, his mild academic appearance contrasting sharply with the devastating implications of his words. Our analysis of your defensive networks, supply chains, and military capabilities is now complete. We have mapped every critical system in your empire and identified the precise points where strategic pressure would cause total collapse. General Stone joined the broadcast, her military bearing leaving no doubt about her competence or determination. We could render your entire civilization non-functional within 72 hours if we chose to pursue that course of action. Your fleets would find themselves without fuel, supplies, or communication. Your planets would lose power, water, and food distribution. Your governments would cease to function. The transmission paused for a moment, letting the full weight of these words sink in across the galaxy. On every council world, military leaders were frantically trying to verify their defensive positions while discovering that many of their most critical systems had already been compromised. But we do not choose destruction, Morrison clarified, his tone becoming more diplomatic. Humanity has always preferred cooperation to conquest, growth to domination. We choose evolution over extinction, both for ourselves and for others. Ambassador Lisa Grant appeared in the transmission, her diplomatic training evident as she addressed the crisis. The galaxy has stagnated under council rule for 10 millennia. You have become so comfortable in your positions of authority that you have forgotten how to grow, how to adapt, how to face new challenges, and emerge stronger. We offer you a choice, Morrison said, as the display behind him showed two different futures. On one side was an image of the galaxy under continued council rule, static and unchanging. On the other side was a dynamic civilization, where different species worked together to achieve things none could accomplish alone. You can acknowledge that the old order is ending, and work with us to build something better, General Stone continued. Or you can cling to your ancient privileges and watch your empire crumble as the galaxy moves beyond your ability to control. Dr. Coleman provided the scientific perspective that many council races would understand. Our analysis indicates that the galaxy faces threats from beyond its borders within the next century, forces that will make our current demonstration look like a minor disagreement between neighbors. The choice is whether we face those challenges united and prepared, or divided and vulnerable. The transmission showed images of deep space monitoring stations that the Council had never known existed. Human sensors had detected signs of massive civilizations in distant galaxies, some of which appeared to be moving in directions that would eventually bring them into contact with Council space. We have been watching and preparing while you rested on your achievements, Morrison explained. We have developed the technology and tactics needed to defend this galaxy, but we cannot do it alone. No single species, no matter how advanced, can face what is coming. Captain Foster appeared in the transmission with tactical data that made the scope of the threat clear. The approaching forces use weapons that could sterilize entire star systems and travel methods that make our fastest ships look motionless. The only way to survive their arrival is to advance our technology and unify our defenses to a degree that the galaxy has never seen. This is why we developed our capabilities in secret, Admiral Kelly added. Not to conquer or dominate, but to ensure that someone would be ready when the time came to defend everything we all hold dear. Morrison concluded the transmission with a simple but profound statement. The Council mocked Earth because you could not imagine anything beyond your own experience. We are offering you the chance to be part of something that has never existed before, a galactic civilization that grows, stronger through diversity and cooperation, rather than stagnation and control. As the transmission ended, silence fell across the galaxy. The beings who had ruled for thousands of years now faced a reality they had never imagined possible. Humanity, the species they had dismissed as primitive children, possessed the power to reshape the entire galactic order on Earth. Morrison turned away from the communication array and looked at his fellow humans. Well, that should give them something to think about. The council that had mocked Earth now faced their greatest challenge in millennia. Evolve or become irrelevant as the galaxy entered a new age under human leadership. 3 weeks after the transmission that changed everything. The council chambers on Centauri Prime looked very different from the place where humanity had been mocked and dismissed. The great crystal dome above had been replaced overnight, not destroyed but improved with human quantum shielding technology that made their previous defenses look like paper barriers. Against a hurricane. Vor, Lack the Ancient no longer sat with the casual confidence of 10,000 years of unchallenged rule. His branch-like arms trembled slightly as he called the emergency session to order. Knowing that the beings about to enter his chamber were no longer supplicants seeking his approval, but equals, who could end his civilization with a thought, the massive doors opened and Captain Jake Morrison entered. But he was no longer the humble diplomat who had stood alone on the speaking platform months earlier. Behind him walked Admiral Grace Kelly, General Patricia Stone, Dr. Richard Coleman, and a dozen other humans whose casual confidence spoke of absolute certainty in their position and capabilities. Morrison approached the center of the chamber and looked up at the assembled aliens who had once laughed at his people. Now their expressions showed fear, confusion, and grudging respect as they tried to comprehend how completely the balance of power had shifted. "Counselors," Morrison began, his tone respectful but firm, "we return not as petitioners seeking your permission to join galactic civilization, but as partners ready to help build something greater than anything that has come before." Ambassador Lisa Grant stepped forward, her diplomatic skills evident as she addressed the assembled representatives. "Humanity proposes the establishment of the Galactic Federation, a governing body that replaces the hierarchical council structure, with a system based on contribution and capability rather than age and tradition." The human delegation activated holographic displays that filled the chamber with proposed governmental structures, technological sharing protocols, and defensive agreements that would revolutionize how galactic civilization operated. Instead of a few dominant species ruling over dozens of lesser ones, the Federation would be built on the principle that every race had something valuable to contribute. Dr. Coleman addressed the technological implications of the proposal. "We are prepared to share certain innovations that will advance every species in the galaxy by centuries rather than millennia. Quantum healing techniques that could extend lifespans indefinitely, manufacturing methods that could eliminate resource scarcity forever, and defensive technologies that could protect against threats that none of us have yet encountered." The displays showed medical techniques that could repair genetic damage and restore youth, industrial processes that could convert pure energy into any form of matter, and weapons that could defend entire star systems against invasion from forces beyond the galaxy. In return, General Stone added with military precision, "We expect full partnership in galactic affairs, with decision-making authority proportional to contribution and capability rather than historical precedent or traditional authority." Counselor Vex, still struggling to accept the complete reversal of his species' position, found the courage to ask the question that terrified him. "And if we refuse to accept these terms? If we choose to maintain the traditional order?" More expression remained pleasant and diplomatic, but his words carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Then you are free to continue as you have for the past 10,000 years, while humanity establishes its own sphere of influence with those species wise enough to embrace the future rather than cling to the past." Captain Helen Foster provided intelligence updates that made the scope of humanity's support clear. Our deep space reconnaissance has already been contacted by 17 species, requesting protection and technological partnership. 3 minor council races have formally requested to join our federation, and 2 major powers are considering similar moves. The implications were staggering. If the council refused to adapt, they would find themselves ruling over an ever-shrinking territory, while humanity built a competing civilization that offered better technology, stronger defenses, and more equitable representation. There is another factor to consider, Foster continued as her display showed deep space sensor readings that made several council members gasp in shock. Our monitoring networks have identified multiple threats approaching this galaxy from intergalactic space, forces that possess technology, and numbers that make our recent demonstration look like a minor skirmish between neighbors. The sensor data showed massive fleets moving between galaxies, their energy signatures, indicating weapons that could sterilize entire star systems and defenses that could withstand attacks from entire civilizations. The approaching forces were still decades away, but their intent was clearly hostile. Ambassador Grant softened her tone as she explained humanity's deeper motivations. We do not seek to replace your civilizations or diminish the achievements of your species. We seek to build upon the foundations you have laid, to create something greater than the sum of its parts that can defend everything we all hold dear. Dr. Coleman added the scientific perspective that resonated with many of the assembled aliens. Humanity's greatest strength has always been our ability to adapt, to overcome obstacles that others consider insurmountable, and to find solutions that conventional thinking says are impossible. But we cannot face what is coming alone, and neither can you. We have spent months studying your species, your cultures, and your unique capabilities. Coleman continued, the Etherians possess psychic abilities that could revolutionize communication and coordination. The Zentari have mastered energy manipulation techniques that could power our defenses. The Krillians have developed tactical expertise that could optimize our battle strategies. Morrison gestured to encompass all the assembled aliens as he made his final argument. Combined with human innovation and adaptability, we could build a galactic civilization that spans multiple galaxies, that grows stronger through diversity rather than weaker through division, and that can face any challenge the universe presents. The old order mocked Earth because you could not imagine anything beyond your own experience, Morrison concluded. We offer you the chance to be part of something unprecedented in galactic history, a civilization built on cooperation rather than domination, innovation rather than stagnation, and hope rather than fear. The chamber fell silent as the weight of the decision settled on the assembled representatives. They were being offered a choice between clinging to 10,000 years of tradition or embracing a future that promised both incredible opportunities and terrifying challenges. Vorlok, the ancient, spoke first, his voice carrying the weight of his species' long history. You ask us to abandon everything that has maintained galactic peace for millennia. How can we trust that humanity will not become the very tyrants you claim to oppose? Dr. Coleman answered with the patience of a teacher, explaining complex concepts. Because tyranny requires the suppression of growth and innovation. And those are the very things that will be essential for our survival. Any species that tries to dominate others will quickly fall behind as the galaxy advances, making domination both impractical and self-defeating. Admiral Kelly added the military perspective. Our analysis shows that the approaching threats will require the combined efforts of every advanced species in the galaxy. No single race, no matter how powerful, can stand alone against what is coming. Unity is not just preferable, it is essential for survival. Counselor Zinara uncoiled from her position and spoke with the wisdom that had made her species respected throughout the galaxy. If we agree to this federation, what guarantees do we have that our cultures and traditions will be preserved? Ambassador? Grant smiled as she answered. The Federation's strength comes from diversity, not uniformity. Each species brings unique perspectives and capabilities that make the whole stronger. Destroying that diversity would weaken us all and defeat the purpose of unity. The displays around the chamber showed proposed Federation colonies, where multiple species worked together, sharing technology and knowledge while maintaining their distinct cultural identities. Human cities with Etherian meditation gardens, Zentari energy sculptures, and Krillian training facilities that created something entirely new while honoring each species' heritage. "What about our existing governments and social structures?" asked a representative from one of the smaller council races. General Stone answered with diplomatic care. "The Federation does not seek to replace existing governments, but to coordinate between them. Your species would continue to govern themselves, according to their own traditions, while participating in the larger galactic community." Captain Foster provided tactical information that made the benefits clear. Federation membership includes access to our defensive technologies and mutual protection agreements. Any threat to one member becomes a threat to all members, backed by the combined military might of every participating species. Morrison sensed that the moment had come for the final push. "Counselors, we are not asking you to make this decision in ignorance. Dr. Coleman has prepared demonstration packages that will show you exactly what Federation membership offers." Coleman activated devices that had been quietly placed around the chamber, and suddenly every alien present could feel the difference. Their aging bodies felt stronger and more vital as quantum healing fields repaired cellular damage. Their minds became clearer and more focused as neural enhancement fields optimized their brain chemistry. "This is just the beginning," Coleman explained, as the aliens marveled at the sensations. "Federation medical technology could extend your lifespans by thousands of years while maintaining perfect health. Our manufacturing techniques could provide unlimited resources. Our defensive systems could make your worlds immune to any conceivable attack." The chamber erupted in excited discussion as representatives felt capabilities they had never imagined possible. Species that had been declining due to age or genetic problems suddenly saw hope for renewal. Races that had struggled with resource limitations realized they could have abundance beyond their dreams. Vorlok raised his arms for silence, and for the first time in weeks, the gesture carried its old authority. "The Council will reassess to consider this proposal. We will reconvene in 3 days with our decision." As the aliens filed out of the chamber, many of them were already talking excitedly about the possibilities they had experienced. The fear and confusion of the past weeks was being replaced by excitement and hope as they began to understand what humanity was really offering. Morrison turned to his fellow humans as the chamber emptied. "Well, that went better than I expected." Admiral Kelly smiled as she reviewed the biometric data from the demonstration. The neural scans show overwhelming positive response. Fear levels dropped by 70%, while optimism indicators increased by over 200%. "They're going to accept," Ambassador Grant said with quiet confidence. "They've seen what we can offer, and they've felt what it's like to be part of something greater than themselves." 3 days later, Vorlok the Ancient stood before the assembled council and spoke the words that would reshape galactic civilization forever. The Galactic Council formally dissolves itself and votes unanimously to join the Galactic Federation under the terms proposed by humanity. The chamber erupted in celebration, as species that had been enemies for centuries embraced as future partners. The age of the Council's rigid hierarchy was over, replaced by a new era where every voice mattered and every species could contribute to something greater than any of them could achieve alone. Captain Jake Morrison stood where he had once been, mocked and dismissed, now surrounded by beings who saw humanity not as primitive children, but as the catalyst for the greatest advancement in galactic history. The Council had mocked Earth and watched their empire burn, but from those ashes had risen something far more powerful and beautiful than anything that had come before.